Hello, guys, and thanks for tuning in to the MMA Cash Cage podcast, the show where I break down MMA action and try to put a little extra money in your pocket. I'm your host, Tanner Martin, and today I'll be breaking down UFC Fight Night 65, Miocic vs. Hunt. But before we get into that, let's just recap UFC 186 and how we did there. 9-3 overall on our predictions for the fights, 3-1 overall in our betting for plus 3.67 units. We'll go over our bets here. The only one we lost was the straight bet on Yves Jabouet, the plus 360 underdog. It was a 2 unit play, profit 7.2 units. I like the way Jabouet even started the fight. He landed that takedown. He looked okay. He just ended up getting caught by Almeida, who, obviously showed that his hands really are a big deal and he could be a contender in that division, in a little while. Our next one, Chad Laprise and Random Marcos. That was a parlay. Chad Laprise minus 325 favorite. Random Marcos minus 260 favorite for a combined parlay of minus 123. That was a 3 unit play. Profit 2.44 units. That was a good play. Random Marcos, she lost around in that fight, but eventually was able to win the third and win a 29-28 decision. Chad Laprise, that was kind of weird to me. He looked good early, and then he looked like he just gassed out. Barberine is a guy who just keeps coming, and when you watch that fight, Laprise looked like he didn't have any more to go, and he just gassed out, couldn't keep going. But eventually in the third, he kind of regained himself and ended up winning that one in a close decision as well. And then our final play was parlay with John Makdessi, the minus 175 favorite, and Quentin Rampage Jackson, the minus 300 favorite, for a average of plus 110. That was a 2 unit play, profited 2.2 units. Yeah, that was a good fight too for Rampage. Minus 300. Came in against Maldonado. Maldonado didn't really look good. Rampage really, honestly, didn't look too good, but ended up getting the W. It was a good decision for him back in the UFC. Good fight. And John Makdessi, he looked really good against a guy coming up on short notice. Makdessi was just able to demolish him. And it was just a quick fight for Makdessi. He looked really good, and it was a good first round KO. I actually forgot one. We had one final bet, was a straight bet. Pat Cote, the minus 195 favorite. It was a 2 unit play, profited 1.03 units. Like I said, he was a minus 195 favorite against an aging Joe Riggs, but ended up coming out. He had a decent decision. It wasn't his best performance, obviously, but he's kind of on the decline as well. So, for him, it was an okay decision. Is he going to be back in the top 10? Probably not. But against an aging Joe Riggs, he looked all right. It was a good fight for him, and he ended up getting the win. So, like I said, not too bad for our first go at it. 3-1 in bets, and actually made a little money. Plus 3.67 units, so not terrible. But let's get right into this one, guys. Not a great card, but it's all right. It's I watch them all, so it is what it is. I'll watch every card, but we'll start right from the bottom here. We got a flyweight battle between Alptekin Ozkalic, a Turkish wrestler, minus 185 favorite, taking on the UFC newcomer Ben Nugent. Oshkalitz, 9-3 overall, 1-2 in the UFC. He has a split decision over Darren Uyonama, unanimous decision over Louis Smolka, and a TKO loss to John Lineker overall in the UFC. 1-2, not great, but good wrestling. And when you look at him, he has good strength. He throws a lot of power punches, but he does kind of lack that striking technique that you'd like to see. But on the ground, he has decent top control. And against Uyunama in his debut, he didn't look great by any means, but he was able to control that fight, and it was a decent win for him. But he does have a questionable gas tank. He seems to get flustered if he can't get the takedown sometimes. Like I said, his striking isn't the best. It's not crisp. It's not great technique. But when you look at him for a wrestler in the UFC, he's okay at this point. He's still early in his career. He's taking on the newcomer Ben Nugent. 13-5 overall. Obviously, this is his debut. He's coming off a split decision loss in his last fight, which I actually thought he lost the fight. He was controlled against the cage for most of the fight. striking-wise, he didn't really land much. His opponent landed less, but still, he was basically controlled the entire fight. When I look at Nugent, though, he hasn't fought any good competitors, no strong competition to this point. And, for his fighting, he's a fast starter, but he has poor takedown defense. But also, he does have a decent get up from the ground. He was taken down a couple times in his last fight. He was able to pop up, but still, like I said, he was controlled basically the entire fight. He stays active when he's in bad spots. He was taken down, threw a lot of punches from the bottom. Um, and he has decent striking technique, but he leaves his hands low in the striking defense department, and he has trouble reversing the cage clinch. When it gets close to the cage, like I said, he basically controlled the entire time. When you look at this fight, though, for Oskalitz, it's really do or die at this point. He looked good in his debut, but other than that, he fell short in his subsequent appearances. My biggest problem with him, like I said earlier, is his gas tank. He just seems to have trouble pacing himself. I think that led to his loss to Smolka and Lineker. I'm not really overly impressed with the guy, but when you look at who he's fighting, Ben Nugent, I'm less impressed with him. Like I said, UFC newcomer. He hasn't fought the caliber guys that Oskalich has fought, and I just think, looking at that, I think his only chance in this fight is to catch him early, because he does come out pretty quick, and I expect him to try to do that. I expect him to come out swinging pretty heavy right away. But Oskalitz, he should know that that's going to come. I like Oskalitz to probably land a couple of those power shots I talked about earlier. Not the best technique, but against a newcomer who, isn't very experienced. I like him to probably catch him a couple times and get the fight to the ground, obviously, when he can, which I believe he can. I believe he'll be able to do pretty easily. I just simply feel, man, Nugent, he's not there yet. He's not ready yet, and I think he's going to go... It's going to lead to an 0-1 start for him in the UFC. And my prediction for that one is going to be Altekin Oskalitz. I'm going to give him a round 2 TKO. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a decision, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Think he might be able to catch this new kid. He has good power. I'm going to give him a round 2 TKO, Altekin Oskalitz. Our next fight is a welterweight bout between Vic Grujic, the minus 120 favorite, against Brendan O'Reilly, who's even odds. Vic Grujic, 7-4 overall, 1-2 in the UFC. He was the Ultimate Nations semifinalist. When I look at him, dude has basic movement, sloppy technique. He has decent power, but he's kind of slow. His technique, like I said, is just really not there. He has good striking, though, from the cage clinch position, when he's up against the cage. He has landed some shots in his previous fights, where other guys kind of just try to work back. He does work from there, landed a couple good shots in a few fights. But my thing is, he leaves himself open for, shots too often. Like I said, his technique's not that good. His striking defense isn't great, and, he's always... Seems like he leaves himself open for big shots a lot. He'll be taking on Brendan O'Reilly, 5-1 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Zhang Lipang. He's never beaten a fighter with a winning record, if you think about that. I mean, that's, 5-1, a decent record, but never beat an opponent with a winning record. To me, he's just superbly underwhelming as a whole. He doesn't seem to have much power. A poor gas tank in the Lipang fight. That's probably the reason he's moving back to welterweight. When I look at this one, breaking it down, it's a fight against two men who really can't even be considered gatekeepers at this point. I mean, they're both just kind of poor fighters trying to, get a couple wins in the UFC, but they're just not really that good. I feel that Grujic has better power, and I also think, he's a little bit more explosive when looking for openings. Brendan O'Reilly, to me, just really has to get this fight to the ground to have any success. And I still think that, looking at the fighters, I think Grujic will be able to get back up if he does get it to the ground. Not a really exciting fight to me. Not, obviously, no big implications to this fight at all. It's almost really a toss-up who I think's going to win. But for this one, I'm just going to go with Grujic. Just like I said, I think, he has a little more heart. He's an older guy, but you could definitely tell he loves being in there. And I'm just going to give Grujic, honestly, on pure willpower, basically. Like, both of these guys kind of match up as just bums. I mean, I don't want to say it. I don't mean to be, belittling to the fighters. That's something I can never do. But, they're just not very good. So I'm going to go with Grujic by decision here. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a split decision. Just a close fight overall. Our next one, we have a women's strawweight bout. It's Kaylin Curran taking on Alex Chambers. Karan is the -190 favorite. Chambers, the +165 underdog. Looking at Karan, she's 3-1 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. She lost her UFC debut to Paige Van Zandt, a third round TKO, which, I mean, at this point, it's a tough loss to Paige Van Zandt, who really, as of late, after the Herrig fight, she's looking like she could be a contender in that division. So it's really not that bad of a loss. Looking at Karan, she has good clinch throws, decent ground control. Her striking, it can be improved, but overall, she's still a new fighter. 3-1, only 4 fights total. So there's a lot to see on her yet. The book's still kind of out on both these fighters. They're both very early in their careers. Looking at Alex Chambers, 4-2 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. She was on The Ultimate Fighter. She lost to Ram Nayunis by submission. She also lost her debut in the UFC to Ashlyn Daly by a first-round armbar. When I look at her, she's fought at atom weight in the past, 105 pounds. So for the strawweight division, she's pretty small. She can make that weight easily. She looks small in there against other 115s. So, I mean, overall, like I said, still just not too much on these girls because it's pretty early in both their careers. I can't really give a good breakdown of this one. When I look at Karan, she had some success in the Van Zandt fight. Was able to get her to the ground a couple times, and she was controlling her for a little while, but still eventually Van Zandt got back up. Just seemed to have more will in that one. But eventually, like I said, Paige just poured it on and kind of broke Karan, ended up getting that third round TKO. And for Chambers, in her first fight, she wasn't really able to have any success against Ashlyn Daly. Looked a ton bigger than she did. She was kind of controlled for the whole fight, or the whole round, really. It was a one-round fight after being, she was submitted eventually. I think the key to this fight for both women is just to secure the takedown and dominate the fight on the ground. Standing up, like I said, I just feel that they both really, no one has an edge. On the ground, I'll give it to Karan. I think that she, can get it to the ground. I think that she'll be able to control it on the ground more so than Chambers. But again, this one, this is kind of a toss-up fight too. It's really hard to say who's who. And from a gambling perspective, I'm going to stay away from this one just because, like I said, they're both just young fighters. The book's still out on both of them. I'm not really sure. But I did go with Karan by decision just because, like I said, I feel I feel that she could probably control the fight on the ground more so than Chambers, so I'm going to go with Karan by decision in this one. Our next one is a middleweight fight between Dylan Andrews, both even odds on these guys. Dylan Andrews against Brad Scott. Andrews 17-6 in his career, won no contest, 2-2 in the UFC. He has a KO win over Papi Abedi and Jimmy Quinlan, and an injury loss to Clint Hester. I mean, a TKO loss, but he injured his shoulder in the fight, couldn't continue. And also a KO loss to Sam Alvey. And in that one, he was actually taking Sam Alvey down, and like a suplex takedown almost, and he landed on his head pretty hard. I think that kind of led to the knockout. He wasn't knocked out on it, but it definitely hurt him, and Alvey kind of just turned around on him, boom, boom, landed 2 shots, and that was a wrap. Looking at Andrews, he keeps his hands pretty low in fights, which obviously can lead to him eating some shots. But he does have decent takedowns, and he has good power. He also has good takedown defense. So, if Brad Scott tries to get to the floor, I think that Andrews will have, an okay chance to keep it up. Also looking at him, I just think he's overly cautious in fights. He doesn't really open up striking. He's not a quick starter. He's kind of cautious, waits a little too long in my opinion, and also injury prone. He injured his hand in the first round of the Abedi fight, and obviously to Clint Hester he lost after he dislocated his shoulder. Looking at Brad Scott's 9-3 overall, 1-2 in the UFC. He lost to Robert Whittaker in the Smashes final, and he defeated Michael Kuiper by front choke. Also lost to Claudio Silva by decision, so 1-2 overall. Whittaker is a tough loss. Kuiper is a nobody, and Claudio Silva, again, it is what it is. I think he's a tough fighter, though. He has a good ability to grind against the cage. Keep the fight there, just keep the pressure on. But when you look at him in the striking department, he uses wild striking. He's not very technical, throws a lot of power shots, just kind of arms flailing. Also, questionable gas tank. honestly, in the Claudio Silva fight, he just outclassed him in the second round. He had him hurt. He was beating him up pretty bad, and just he knew that Silva was tired, but he just couldn't dig deep in round three and ended up losing that fight. Just kind of a low fight IQ. He couldn't really put it all together. Was he hurt? Who knows? He could have been just completely gassed. It is what it is. But it just in that third round, he couldn't get it done. Um, Overall, again, this is one of those fights, man. I just don't think these guys have, really they're not showing any promise in the UFC. None of these guys are going to go on to be in the top 10. It's just really not in the cards for them, in my opinion. The key for this fight, though, for both of them is just, who's going to show up? Who's going to show up and fight? Is Dylan Andrews going to show up and just say, I need a win? How about Brad Scott? Is he going to do the same thing? Come in, I need a win, come out strong, look good, come out and start fast. Because I said they're both fairly hesitant, and neither of them really have good technique. It could be an exciting fight. Who knows? Maybe they'll just go in there and wing at each other, and we'll see a first round KO. That is fairly likely, in my opinion. And when you look at Andrews in that fight with Abedi, he was able to land some solid shots at the end and get the TKO, but he was losing the fight up to that point. He lost the first two rounds. And Scott, he lost the first fight lost the first round against Silva and was just killing him in the second, but just lacked urgency in the third and wasn't able to get the decision and ended up losing by decision. So in this fight, I'm going to go with Andrews. I think it's going to be a close fight, like I said, but I just think that he has shown in the UFC anyway, like I said, the Abedi fight ended up getting that third round TKO. I think he has, just more desire. I think he has the better ability to dig deep and get that finish. Again, though, this is another one to stay away from betting wise. Both of these guys are just, who knows? So I'm going to go, like I said, I'm going to go with Andrews by decision. Again, wouldn't be surprised if it's a split decision. It's just a fight that, I don't know. Who knows, man? I'm sorry I keep saying on this podcast, guys, but there's just a lot of the early fights are just kind of, who knows, man? But, whatever. Like I said, I like Andrews by decision. We'll see what happens. Our next one, we have a women's strawweight bout between Beck Rawlings, the minus 165 favorite. She's taking on Lisa Ellis, the plus 145 underdog. Beck Rawlings, 5-4 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. She lost in tough to Tisha Torres, and then lost her UFC debut to Heather Jo Clark. The thing about Rawlings is that she has really good boxing technique. She has good power, and she's proven that. She has a good jab, really good jab. Nice, like I said, nice boxing technique, nice power in there. But when it comes to the clinch and it comes to ground fighting, she has trouble breaking away from the clinch, and just obviously struggles with wrestlers. When you look at Lisa Ellis, she's 15-9 overall, 0-1 in the UFC. She lost in the Tough House also to Jessica Penne by submission, and she lost to Felice Herring by submission as well. In her UFC debut, I'm sorry. Looking at Ellis, she has good grappling. She's a really good submission specialist, and when she's on the ground, she has non-stop submission attempts. She's always throwing something up, trying to get the submission in the fight. She's older though, 32. I mean, not too old, but career-wise, 15-9. You're talking 24 fights, 32 years old. Her gas tank is a little questionable to me. Breaking this one down, it's a decent matchup for the division. Both of these women, though, they really need a win. Like I said, Beck Rawlings had really good striking in her debut against Clark, but was unable to really do anything in the ground game. And when I look at, Lisa Ellis, she had some success getting takedowns against Herrig, but was just overpowered by her, really. Herrig just looked like the stronger fighter. And I really do feel Beck is probably the stronger fighter in this fight. And if it remains standing, I just think, Beck will put on almost a clinic. Overall, it's definitely going to favor her in a stand-up matchup. But if the fight hits the ground, I really think that Lisa Ellis will be able to control Rawlings, who isn't as strong as Herrig. Like I said, I do feel she's probably the stronger fighter. I just don't think she's as strong as Felice Herrig. And I think that Ellis will be able to, kind of control her on the ground a little bit. And like I said, although she's getting older, and she would certainly lose a striking match against Beck, I just think for some reason she's going to be able to get that takedown. I think she can control Beck, and like I said, she's always throwing up submissions. I wouldn't be surprised if she can catch Beck Rawlings. So, I'm going to go with Ellis in this one. I'm going to go with Ellis by first round submission. I think, they're both going to come in a little fast. Beck definitely going to try to push the pace, but if Ellis can get her down, man, she's going to be going for submissions nonstop, and I like her to get one in the first round here. But definitely take a note that, the longer this fight goes on and the longer it stays on the feet, the more it's going to benefit Beck Rawlings. But like I said, Lisa Ellis, first round submission in that fight. Our next one is a middleweight matchup between Sam Alvey, the minus 400 favorite, taking on Dan Kelly, the plus 325 underdog. Sam Alvey, 25-6-1, or no, sorry, 25-6, one no contest in his career, 2-1 in the UFC. Lost a fight against Tom Watson, which was a really good fight. He was losing and ended up trying to pour it on. He had Watson hurt, just couldn't get that win. And he has KO wins over Dylan Andrews on the card tonight also, and Cesar Ferreira. Looking at Alvey, he's a counter puncher, and it seems to take him a little while to get his opponent, feel his opponent out. But he just has that unreal power in both hands. You look at the guy; he doesn't look like he'd hold the power he does, but man, he's crushing dudes in the UFC, just absolutely. Even his loss against Watson, he had Watson hurt pretty bad. He had every opponent he's faced, all of his 3 UFC fights, he's had his opponents rocked in every one, like I said. So, you got to watch out for his power. He'll be taking on Dan Kelly, 8-0 overall, 2-0 in the UFC. Submission win over Luke Zachridge, and a decision over Patrick Walsh, which was a really weird fight. I honestly just got to do a quick side note on that one. Patrick Walsh, that whole fight, would just throw a strike and do this weird duck. It was stupid. It was annoying. I don't know. I hated watching that one. It was just an odd fight. But Kelly ended up getting the decision over him anyway. When I look at Kelly, he also, too, he has basic movement. He's not very good in his feet. He's not a lot of foot movement, not a lot of head movement. He kind of plots forward. He keeps his hands super low, but he does have really good takedowns, and I think, good overall strength. Obviously, good grappling strength. He has good submissions. He has a good straight punch. He doesn't throw a ton of hooks. He has a nice straight punch. But, the thing that I think is really weird about Dan Kelly is that he tends to stand with all the opponents, even though he has an Olympic judo background. He just seems to stand up with all the guys he faces, and I don't really get it. If he could just get the fight to the ground, he could really work on those submissions. But, against Sam Alvey, that'll be a bad idea. But breaking this one down, this will be the 3rd consecutive fight that Dan Kelly's coming in as an underdog, but this is also, the most heavily underdog that he is against Alvey. Alvey, excellent counterpuncher, like I said earlier, ability to KO anyone in the division with a punch. He one punch. He shows that good of power. Like I said, all 3 of his fights, he's rocked his opponents. The problem with him, though, the problem I have with Alvey is that he's a slow starter, and he eats a ton of leg kicks, man, just without checking. He eats them, and he's able to plot through, and he's able to, still land a good shot. But, if fighting a better fighter, not saying it's Dan Kelly, but just, in general, someone's going to start kicking that leg, and he's not going to be able to eat all those leg strikes. Dan Kelly, a judo Olympian, but for some reason just stands up with everyone he fights. So Kelly, in this fight, if he has a brain, he needs to get Alvey to the mat as quick as he can, because Alvey is just way too dangerous on the feet. And with, like I said earlier, Kelly keeping his hands so low, trading strikes with Sam Alvey is not going to be his best option. As long as Alvey's able to avoid the takedown attempts, which, I don't know that he will be able to. I think he could be put down, but, I think Alvey will be able to pop back up. I don't think Dan Kelly is going to be able to hold him down. So, without getting taken down, and if Dan Kelly comes out and tries to, brawl again, I think he'll knock Kelly out in the late first round, early second. I should note, though, that I think Alvey is a little too heavily favored here, at minus 400, because Dan Kelly, if he does use that judo and get Alvey to the ground and can control him there, he could grind out a decision. I think minus 400 is a little too big, but that's not going to take me away from, still going with my prediction for Sam Alvey. I'm going to take a round 2 KO. Like I said, early or late first, early second round. I'm just going to go with a second round KO for Sam Alvey for another win in the UFC. Our next fight is a welterweight contest between KO Kyle Noke, the minus 120 favorite, against Jonathan Webb, who is debuting here, making his UFC debut, and he is even money. Kyle Noke, 27-1 overall, not 27-1, sorry, 20 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw, 4-3 in the UFC. Most recently lost a decision to Patrick Cote. Looking at Noak, he looks pretty good at welterweight. Again, he's a fighter also getting older, but he has crisp striking, definitely has a strong jab, good fast kicks, good leg kicks, good high kicks. He just has good kicks overall. Pretty strong for the welterweight division. And the thing I actually like the most about Noak, which is, kind of odd, but he's just really active off of his back. He's throwing elbows, punches a lot of the time. He's not just laying there. He's always trying to be active, trying to score points, and, that's something I think's, admirable about Noak. He's taking on the UFC newcomer Jonathan Webb, 8-0, 1 no contest. He won his last fight by first round submission. He fought his no contest actually was against Lyman Good, which was overturned after an accidental eye poke. But Lyman Good in that fight was just completely just outclassing Webb. But he ended up getting lucky, whatever. Looking at Webb, he has good use of his low kick, but he just doesn't really appear super fluid on his feet. And then that thing, man, just a severe lack of competition, minus Lyman Good, who was toasting him basically. So when I break this one down, man, it's just it's do or die for Kyle Noak. He only fought 7 times in his 4.5 UFC career, plagued by injuries a lot, and he either needs to get a win and get going, or just be done with the sport. He obviously has had mixed success at 4-3, but I think he looks better at welterweight than he has at middleweight. For Webb, this is just, I think, too big of a step up in competition. He never fought he never fought outside of the U.S. I'm sorry. And as a matter of fact, he's fought 8 of his 9 fights in New Jersey. The other one being a state away in Pennsylvania. I just feel that this is too much, too fast for Webb. Like I said, this is the biggest stage. It's a different country. It's the UFC. It's media. Everything. It's a lot for Webb to take in for his first fight against a veteran like Noak. And like I said, although I do think Noak is kind of on a decline in his career, he's still well-rounded. He trains at Jackson's, one of the most prestigious camps in the country, obviously. And I feel that taking that year off, I'm just hoping to see a rejuvenated Kyle Noak, and he'd just be taking on a kid who just doesn't have the experience that Noak has. And after all of it, I think Noak's going to be able to get him with some good strikes. I don't think Webb's really going to have much of an answer. I like Kyle Noak in this one, and I'm going with a second round TKO for Kyle Noak. Our next fight is a featherweight bout. It's Hatsu Hioki, the -300 favorite, taking on Dan Hooker, the +230 underdog. Hatsu Hioki, 27-8-2 in his career, 3-4 in the UFC. He's pretty tall for the division. That's one of the first things I have listed. He's pretty tall for the division, but so is Dan Hooker. He's 6 foot tall. Hatsu Hioki is 5'11". For Hioki though, I like how he mixes his strikes to the body. He's pretty decent striking. He goes with a lot of body shots. He'll go head, a couple jabs to the head, and dig some good hooks into the body. It's just something you don't see from everyone. A lot of people are just headhunters. Hioki, he does mix his strikes in pretty well. Also good counter striking. He's a BJJ black belt. Really good guard, obviously. Good control from his guard, and a lot of sub attempts from him. He has really good trip takedowns. He gets into the clinch and, he just uses that outside trip, inside trip. It doesn't really seem to matter. He's able to get to the fight to the ground. I don't want to say every fight, but a lot of his fights, he's taken it to the ground. The only thing about him, though, on the ground is that he has kind of poor top control. Fighters, have just been taken down by him, and they're able to get up. Or what I even like less about Hioki is that he seems to try for a lot of submissions without hooks in, or he'll set up an arm bar, just doesn't have the arm completely and roll for it anyway, and then he just loses the position a lot of the time. But he's taking on Dan Hooker, who is 11-5 overall, 1-1 in the UFC. Hooker, he uses his jab pretty well. He seems to remain calm under pressure. When he fought Entwistle, he was caught in a heel hook, a pretty tight heel hook too. It looked good, but Dan Hooker just kept elbowing the dude in the head, and he wouldn't let it go. He kept holding on to that heel hook, and he just kept hitting him with an elbow. And after a while, he just couldn't take anymore, and ended up getting the TKO on that one. So he's a tough fighter. He's a tough kid. He has good heart. He's able to withstand some decent shots. I think he does keep his arms a little wide in his stance. They just open him up to the uppercut, whatever, a front kick, just something coming up the middle. Even a jab, just right up the middle. He leaves his arms out kind of like, I want to say like Overeem in the Travis Brown fight. He kind of holds his arms that same way. And it's just his striking defense for the most part is pretty poor anyway. He gets kind of frozen when someone throws a good combo at him. Breaking this one down, like I said, Hooker, he's a tough kid, has a ton of heart. Good first win, or good win against Entwistle, but other than that, he hasn't really showed much. His fight with Blanco, he showed a lot of heart. Like that's what I keep saying about this kid. He has good heart. He showed a lot. He was staying in the pocket, trading with him. He was just getting crushed, and he just kept standing in there throwing shots. But he just doesn't really have a good striking defense. He could be a promising prospect, but he's taking on a veteran in Hatsu Hayoki here. He even though he has had mixed success in the UFC, I mean, you got to look at who he's fought. A lot of highly touted opponents. All of his UFC losses come to current top 15 featherweights, so that's something to look at. 3 of his 4 losses are against dudes in the top 10. And looking at that, he won a round against all those fighters. Well, against everyone except Oliveira. That's up for grabs. The other ones on the scorecard, he had won a round on his decision losses, but Oliveira he lost by TKO. I think he won the first round, but you can't really prove that. Hayoki, he's had Hayoki has an opportunity, to showcase his grappling skills and his submissions in this one against, a guy who just I don't really think is going to be able to stop his takedowns. He is tall, but I think he'll still be able to kick those legs out all the same. And the way that he's able to counter strike also leads me to believe that he has the edge on the feet as well against Hooker, who just, like I said, man, just has abysmal striking defense. I like Hayoki to get this fight to the ground pretty quickly, and like I said, he's always throwing submissions around. I like him to get an early submission in this one. I wouldn't even be surprised if, he throws him to the ground, Hooker, counters him, gets on top, and then gets triangled or armbarred. I really wouldn't be surprised to see something like that in this fight. But if he doesn't, turn around, Hayoki on top of him will be able to put something together and put him away, a choke, anything, arm triangle, something, Kimura, whatever. He'll get on top of him, and I think he's going to be able to put this kid away pretty quick. Just kind of a showcase fight, in my opinion, for Hayoki. And I'm going to take him by first round submission in this one. Our next contest is a lightweight fight between Jake Matthews, the minus 175 favorite, taking on James Vick, the plus 155 underdog. Matthews 8-0 overall, 2-0 in the UFC. He has a submission win over Deshaun Johnson and also Wagner Hosha. Matthews a strong base, good cage control. Also has a active top guard, good striking from the top, good forward pressure. He also he never seems to get comfortable, which is a good thing. He's always trying to improve position. He's always trying to look for a submission, improve his position on the ground. Pass to half guard, pass to side control. Land a lot of strikes. He also has good killer instinct. He'll be taking on James Vick, who is 7-0 overall, 3-0 in the UFC. He has a submission win over Ramsey Najem, which is probably his best win, but it was just kind of caught him in a front choke guillotine right away, and just Najem wasn't able to get away from him. Also a decision win over Valmir Lazaro, and a decision win over Nick Hine, which that was a close fight. The Nick Hine fight, I thought he probably did win, but it was really close. I've seen media scores that had Hine winning that fight. When I look at Vick, he keeps his chin pretty high. He has good straight punches, jab and cross, but it's just kind of sloppy form. And he's tentative after the first round, which is pretty weird to see. Most of the time guys kind of get in their groove. after the first round, it seems like he comes out quick, and then he just, kind of just looks like he's not sure what to do in there. Also, it doesn't really seem to have much power, especially again after the first round. And he throws a lot of volume, but he just doesn't land a lot of strikes. He's throwing a lot of head kicks in his last fight and just kind of hitting the arms, hitting the arms. It was just like, okay, he's throwing. Is he scoring though? And that's, something that the judges, obviously in MMA, the judges dick up all the time. It's like he threw a lot of strikes. Did he land them? I mean, kind of, but not clean, not really technically. So that's really up for the judges' debate. To break this one down, I really like Matthews to take this one actually. Like I said, I think James Vick in the UFC to be 2-0 or 3-0. I apologize. I think he's kind of lucky to be there. He's very tentative, doesn't have a lot of power, and he just really hasn't shown anything on the ground. Obviously has that, choke submission. He kind of caught him standing. But I think, he's kind of less than spectacular on his feet. Like I said, he just doesn't seem to land a ton. Jake Matthews is almost, in my opinion, the exact opposite of Vic. Matthews is always moving forward, constantly looking for opportunities to better himself, better his position. I just think in this one, Matthews is going to get Vic against the cage, work on a takedown, and then work to a submission. That's what he does. He just kind of goes how a fighter should go. Gets him down, gets him on the ground, guard, pass, and work for submissions. And I like that Matthews works that way. Also looking at Matthews though, he is at a height and reach disadvantage, but on the ground, the disadvantage is kind of, they could turn into advantage for him looking for a submission. Vic, if his arms are out, you know what I'm saying? It's more to grab. It's a longer arm, easier to armbar, I guess. I think Matthews, he'll stay busy enough on his feet, and like I said, I like him to get him to the ground, and I like him to get that submission finish. So I'm gonna go with this one. I'm gonna take Jake Matthews, second round submission in this one. For our next fight, we have a light heavyweight contest between Anthony Perosh and Sean O'Connell. Perosh minus 155 favorite, O'Connell plus 130 underdog. Anthony Perosh 15-8 overall, 5-5 in the UFC. He has good top control, unless he's fighting Ryan Bader, of course, who he got completely smoked by. But good top control for the most part. He has a jiu-jitsu black belt. He has KO power, he has turned dudes off. So, he does have KO power for being 42 years old, especially, he can hit a guy and, hit them on the button and just turn him right off. He's done it. But also looking at his striking or just his stand up, he's kind of slow on the feet. He kind of plots around, not really bouncy. He doesn't move much, but he's taking on a guy in Sean O'Connell, 16-6 overall, 1-2 in the UFC. Looking at O'Connell, he has decent cage control, also really good forward pressure, but he keeps his hands pretty low, and that could obviously leave him in trouble against a striker like Perosh. But O'Connell's a striker too. Also, when he does get to that cage clinch, he has really good knees to the body. He throws a lot of good knees, hard knees, and he lands a lot of the time. In breaking this one down, both fighters, they could really use a win in this one. O'Connell 1-2 in the UFC, and Perosh, he's 5-5. He's just kind of trying to stick around, I guess. O'Connell in this one, man, he's by far the less technical fighter. But he showed the ability to control fights against the cage. In the striking department, he might not be so technical, but if he can grind against the cage, it really kind of doesn't much matter. And, land some decent shots from that clinch. But he does keep his hands pretty low and doesn't have really a great striking defense. But he definitely does possess some good heart and power. Looking at Perosh, he showed decent power, in his hands, especially against Magalesh. When he caught him, what was that, 7 seconds, something like that? 15 seconds, I forget. It was just quick, though. He caught him, hurt him, got on him, hammer fist, ended the fight. But I think his best bet in this fight is to get on the ground and, work for a submission. Like I said, O'Connell, he has power in his hands, and Perosh, he has good top control against most guys, so I think he should try to work here and get to the ground. If he's unable to get to the ground, I kind of feel like it'll favor O'Connell. Like, I know his technique's not really good, but he's resilient, man. He really is, and he has a good chin. And I just think from a betting perspective, it's another one tonight that I'm going to have to pass on for sure. But for the prediction, I'm going to go with O'Connell. I like how the kid has fought. I like his striking. Not super technical, but if he can land, he can definitely hurt Perosh. And I like him to get a TKO from the feet. Maybe late in the fight. It could be a decent brawl here. And I'm going to take Sean O'Connell for a third round TKO. Oh, there goes my phone. Hold on 1 second, guys. I am sorry. Doop. That's what happens when you're recording stuff like this. Don't get a call all day. Until right now, of course. Why wouldn't I? Alright, guys. I'm sorry about that. I had to cut it out. Just talk to my brother quick. But I guess we got to the end of that one, the Sean O'Connell fight. I said Sean O'Connell. I like third round TKO. Again, one I'm going to stay away from in a betting perspective. But that's what I like. Next fight we have, wow, already our co-main event. This one's going pretty quick. Co-main event between Brad Tavares, the minus 150 favorite, taking on Robert Whittaker, the plus 130 underdog. Tavares is 13-3 overall, 8-3 in the UFC. Recently has decision wins over Lorenz Larkin and Nate Marquardt. He has a decision loss to Yoel Romero, TKO loss to Tim Bosch, which that fight sucked because Tavares looked really good early and Bosch just caught him, but he still did lose, obviously. When I look at Tavares, he has crisp technical striking. He's just gotten better. He's been in the UFC for, a decently long time now, 11 fights. So his striking is just pretty much on point now. He mixes in a good leg kick. He has good cage control, good striking from the clinch. He could leave his hands low at times, but I don't really think it's much of an issue. He does get his guard up. For the most part, obviously not against Tim Bosch, but for the most part he does. He has a pretty good takedown defense, but again, the exception would be Yoel Romero, but you really can't fault him for that. Yoel Romero is just an animal, a complete monster, especially in the wrestling department. What I like about Tavares, though, he tends to control the action in most of his fights. He really does take the center of the octagon, controls the striking, and I really think he does have some underrated strength in the clinch and just in the division overall. Tavares doesn't look like a big guy. He's not ripped. Doesn't look heavy. He just kind of looks normal, but his power is pretty good. He'll be taking on in this one Robert Whittaker, 13-4 overall, 4-2 in the UFC. This is a little while ago. Split decision loss to Court McGee, TKO loss to Stephen Thompson, and a decision win over Mike Rhodes, and also a TKO win over Clint Hester in his move to middleweight. In looking at Whittaker, he's a guy, he kind of keeps his hands pretty low. Decent striking, but his hands, for the most part, just, I don't know. I mean, it's not like he keeps them on his feet, but just overall, I just think he keeps his hands a little bit too low. He has a good head movement. He has a good chin. But like I said, it only takes so many strikes. You keep your hands that low, you could get turned off pretty easily. I think he mixes up his strikes pretty well. A lot of kicks, punches, different techniques. I like that in that respect for Whittaker. But when you look at him, he really hasn't defeated any big name fighters. A split decision to Court McGee. He lost to Stephen Thompson, Mike Rhodes. Who's Mike Rhodes really? And TKO win over Clint Hester, which was a good fight, but not the best. Whittaker's his best performance, breaking this one down, guys. His best performance was against Clint Hester, in his middleweight debut. He looked good. He caught Hester early with just a bomb of a strike, but I really feel in that fight, like, Hester just was never able to recover. He wasn't obviously rocked the whole time, but just, I just think he kind of was, just kind of not out on his feet, but in a way just, was never really fully able to recover from that first bomb he took. And, I can't really take anything away from Whittaker because of that, but, he's a decent fighter. I just really don't think he's beaten any quality opponents at this point in his career. Looking at Brad Tavares, he's a real veteran of the sport, end of the UFC, 11 fights, good mix of competition, really technical striker, like I said earlier, utilizes the leg kicks very well. And I really, the way I'm saying it kind of seems like it's like a landslide of a fight. It really isn't. I don't think it's a bad matchup by the UFC, but, it's Whittaker's biggest test to date, by far. And I'm not really sure if he's ready to take on a guy like Tavares. I think they're kind of throwing him to the sharks here. Tavares is sneaky good. He really is. 8-3 overall. in the UFC, it's a good fighter against, Whitaker, who just really hasn't really proved himself yet. Um, Sorry, one second. A lot of the fighters that Whitaker's faced, they really haven't had very technical striking. And I don't think that Whitaker's ready for a guy like Tavares, who's going to be able to put punches together, good in and out, good movement, good jab, good leg kicks. He's kind of, I think he could get flustered here by Tavares. And also Tavares is a guy, he's going to grind him against the cage. He's going to pick his shots, working some takedowns, and just probably just run a 3-round decision, I think, on this guy. Like I see, the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little scattered here, but, like I said with Tavares and his leg kick, Whitaker is a guy who's kind of heavy on his front foot, so I think that he's going to be able to land a lot of good leg kicks against Whitaker here, and just grind against the cage, gas him out, work in some takedowns, and I think that Brad Tavares will be able to cruise to a 3-round decision in this one. So that's my pick. Brad Tavares, probably unanimous decision. I just really don't see any way Whitaker can shut him down unless he catches him. But yep, Tavares decision in that one. And that will lead us to our final fight of the night. It's a heavyweight matchup, the main event. Stipe Miocic, the -220 favorite, taking on the Super Samoan Mark Hunt, the +180 underdog. You look at Miocic, 12-2 overall, 6-2 in the UFC. Unanimous decision over Gabriel Gonzaga, Roy Nelson. A TKO over Fabio Maldonado on short notice. Obviously, you saw that fight. Stipe just toasted him pretty quickly. That fight was over. Decision loss to Junior Dos Santos. That was a pretty close fight. It was a really good fight, I think, for Stipe. He probably lost. I think it was closer than the judges had it, but anyway, good fight for him. When you look at Stipe, he has good straight punches, a good gas tank. He's really fast for the heavyweight division. It's just it's kind of hard to really get a gauge on this guy. I don't really mean to say that. He has 8 fights in the UFC. It's just like, it depends who you fight in the heavyweight division. You fight, a jiu-jitsu guy in the heavyweight division. You fight, just a striker in the heavyweight division. There's really not very good overall mixed martial artists. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to sound like that. Stipe is one of those guys. He is a mixed martial arts guy, so he's pretty good at everything. He doesn't really have a glaring weakness that I can really say. He's like a Cain Velasquez. Great wrestling, obviously, great striking, great pressure. It's pretty rare though to have guys like that in the heavyweight division. It's more so their power, their jiu-jitsu. Most of them are just power. Obviously, it's a strange division, but he's taking on Mark Hunt. 10 wins, 9 losses, 1 draw in his career. 5-3-1 in the UFC. TKO lost his most recent outing to Fabricio Verdum, which he caught him in the first round. That was really, not a good fight for, Mark Hunt, but he did catch him in the first round. Could Verdum have been going down to try to bait him into coming to the ground? He might have been. Who knows? I'm not certain, but, he did catch him clean. KO win over Roy Nelson. That was a really good fight, a fight I wanted to see for forever. And Mark Hunt was able to just catch Roy with that uppercut and walk away KO. He has a majority draw against Bigfoot Silva. That was an awesome fight, obviously. Everyone's seen that one. Just one of the best heavyweight fights in UFC history, and that's no joke. It was just such a good fight, slobber knocker, both knocking each other down. It was fun, man. That was a really fun one. And then the KO loss to Junior Dos Santos. He was getting beat up the whole fight, and then Dos Santos threw that back kick, and that was pretty good. Spinning back kick, ended up catching him on the top of the head, wobbled him, and hurt him, and finished him off. Honestly, in the breakdown of Mark Hunt, is really almost nothing to say about him. No, I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, the dude is just a headhunter, just absurd power in both hands. Just, that's his game. His game is to knock you out. He comes forward, his hands are low, he doesn't care, his gas tank's empty, and he's still throwing bombs. I mean, this guy just doesn't stop throwing bombs. He can knock anyone out on this planet. Obviously, we've seen him just crunch dudes. But the thing about him, I guess, the one thing you can say is that he does have a poor ground game. 6 of his 9 losses overall are by submission. But, recently he has, shown okay takedown defense. But, again, like I said earlier, he fought mostly strikers in the UFC. He fought a lot of guys who are, trying to stand and trade with him. And for whatever reason, I have no clue because Mark Hunt is an animal on the feet. Breaking this one down, this fight can be really fun to watch, man. Miocic has really developed his game since he first started in the UFC back in 2011, and has become one of the top contenders in the division. You know, realistically, he lost to Junior Dos Santos, who was the number two guy, and he's been the number two ever since, he's lost to Kane twice. He just has always been there at two. JDS is the second best. He's a staple at that point. Looking at Mark Hunt, he's just really a true journeyman of this sport. He started his kickboxing career all the way back in '99, his mixed martial arts career in 2004. So, over 10 years of mixed martial arts. I mean, the record wouldn't really show that, but, the guy has fought a lot of killers. And, I mean, that just goes to show, you just look at some of the heavyweights that he's fought, in their prime. I'm sorry. I just coming up short. I apologize. I don't have it written down. He fought Crow Cop. He fought Shogun. He fought Fedor. You know what I mean? He fought just a bunch of killers back in their pride days when they were all in their prime. Um, and the thing is about Mark Hunt, obviously his style's never changed, but he's just still had some great success because of that just unbelievable power. And when you look at a fight between these two guys, Miocic obviously holds the advantage in every category besides chin and power, in my opinion. Miocic is younger, he's faster, he's far more technical than Mark Hunt, but, you gotta think that if Mark Hunt is able to land in this fight, it doesn't matter. The technique doesn't matter. We saw Miocic against Roy Nelson, use the jab, able to completely batter Roy Nelson, just, almost destroyed him, who is probably the most comparable heavyweight to Mark Hunt is Roy Nelson, and Miocic just completely battered him. But, looking at this one, man, if I had to bet on it, I would bet on Stipe Miocic. This is one I'm staying away from, guys, because, my head says Stipe Miocic, but I'm a fan of this sport, just like everyone listening to this podcast, and my heart says Mark Hunt, man. I want to see Mark Hunt win. He's one of my favorites. He's just a great fighter. Every time he goes out, it's a show, and I think smart money on this fight is obviously Stipe Miocic, but I'm going with Mark Hunt in this one, guys. I could see him catching him on the feet. I could just see him leaning back, rearing up, and just cracking Miocic with a huge shot, sending him down. That's what I hope we see, man. I really do hope we see that this weekend. So my pick for this one is Mark Hunt, second round knockout. That's what I'm gonna go with, guys. So that's the end of the breakdowns. So we'll get right into our gambling plays for this one. Like I said, there's a lot of fights here that I'm staying away from. It kind of sucks, I'm staying away from the main event. It's just, I mean, that's one that everyone wants to watch, everyone wants to put money on. It's just, money-wise, I just don't think it's the smartest play. Like I said, if you're going to throw money down on it, Miocic by decision, even if you could get a prop bet on Miocic by decision, I don't think that's bad. Or, Mark Hunt by KO, that prop is probably close to his underdogged as he is in the fight, because realistically that's probably the only way he could win this one. But my gambling plays start with the first fight of the night. Actually, I started breaking this one down. It's Alptek and Oskalic. I'm gonna take the minus 185 favorite, and we're gonna do a 5-unit play on him here. I know it seems high, and I'm not super huge on Oskalic, but I'm just even less impressed with his UFC newcomer Ben Nugent. He just hasn't fought guys like Oshkolitz. It'll be his biggest fight of his career by far, and well, maybe Lyman Good, who knows, but just sorry, Lyman Good. I am so sorry. Lyman Good, obviously that is not this fight. Scratch that. I apologize. I said it. Just, he really hasn't fought anyone. I'm sorry. I'm a little scattered. It's getting a little long here. But Alptek and Oskalic, the minus 185 favorite. We're going to do a 5-unit play on him. All my gambling plays go from 1 to a 5-unit scale. Obviously 5 being the biggest amount to place on a guy. And at a minus 185 clip, that'll be 5 units to profit, 2.7 units. I just like him that much in this one to just beat the newcomer. I just think he's better than Ben Nugent, and I think he's going to get the nod in this one. Our next gambling play is a parlay. It's going to be Kyle Noke, the minus 110 favorite, if you will, and Hatsu Hayoki, the minus 300 favorite. Actually turns that into a plus 155 underdog bet, if you will. 3 units on this one, guys, will profit you 4.64 units. Noke, I'm not super sure about him, but I just think he's going to beat Webb. That's what I was saying to Lyman Good earlier. That's the Jonathan Webb fight. He fought Lyman Good, got beat up by him. That was his best fight. Kyle Noke, again, aging guy. Can he beat him? Certainly can. Can Jonathan Webb beat Noke? I mean, certainly can. Who knows? I'm not so certain on this fight, but that's what I'm going to go with the parlay with Hayoki. I think a 3-unit play here to profit 4.64 units. I think it's a good play. Fairly safe on Hayoki's part anyway. And then the Noke part, I like Noke to get it done here and get the win. So that's that for that one. We have one more play on the night, and it's Brad Tavares. This is another parlay. Brad Tavares, the minus 150 favorite. Hatsu Hayoki, again, the minus 300 favorite. And Alptekin Oshkolitz, from our first one, the minus 185 favorite. To turn this one all around into a plus 242 underdog pick. We're going to go 4 units on this one, guys, for 9.69 units total. This is something, it's kind of weird. I don't hate doing it myself, but like, for the podcast that, I have Oshkolitz in a straight bet early. Like I think he's going to win. I'm confident that he will win. So I already have him in. Hatsu Hayoki, I'm pretty confident he'll win, but I have him in the second bet. And this last one, just say Oshkolitz gets knocked off early, that already ends our late play. So it kind of sucks. It's a big gamble for me here, especially, only my second show. I'm trying to build, a little bit of a reputation, but that's what I like. And, it just is what it is. I like Brad Tavares. I like Brad Tavares by decision to win that fight. I like Hayoki by submission. I think, for an underdog, or for one of the, heavier favorites on the card, minus Sam Alvey, I just think Hayoki's going to be able to destroy Dan Hooker. And then Alptekin Oshkolitz at minus 185. I just think putting these 3 guys together for the plus 242 overall, for 4 units to profit 9.69, I really like that play, guys. And that's all for the plays, 3 plays total. I'm just going to run down them again. I know I'm blabbing on. I really do apologize. I'm just running through this one. But it's going to be Oshkolitz. Our first play, Oshkolitz, minus 185 favorite, 5 units to profit 2.7. Our second bet, Kyle Noke, parlayed with Hatsu Hayoki. The odds of the parlay, plus 155. That's going to be 3 units, would profit you 4.64 units. And then finally, our three fight parlay, Brad Tavares, minus 150 favorite, Hatsu Hayoki, minus 300 favorite, and Alptekin Oshkolitz, minus 185 favorite for a plus 242 underdog play. That's going to be 4 units to profit 9.69 units. And that's all, guys. Wow, what a show. It was long. I ran through it straight. I apologize. Messed up a little bit here and there, but it is what it is. It's a live show. So if you like the show, if you're winning any money on the show, tell your friends, tell everyone about it. I'm new to this space, but I'm trying to stay. I really do a lot of research on these fights. I love the sport. I watch all the fights anyway, so I might as well do something I love. It's just a podcast trying to get you guys a little extra cash here. And make sure you check us out on Twitter at MMA Cash Cage. You can check us out on Facebook. When I started the Facebook, I accidentally set it up as a person profile. So, if you want to go to the Facebook, you'll have to add MMA Cash Cage as a friend, I guess. I'm not really sure how it'll work. I'll link my my Facebook into my Twitter if you want to look at that. This is going to go up on Podomatic. I'm having trouble getting on iTunes. I really do apologize about that. I'm not sure really what I'm doing with iTunes yet. It's just difficult to me. I will figure it out at one point, though. I promise you, at some point in this show's lifetime, it will be on iTunes. But let's just keep our fingers crossed. Hopefully the next one, we'll see. But that's all, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you can win some money this weekend. I hope we see some good fights. I'm really hoping that Mark Hunt fight's awesome. But that's all we got. And we'll see you next time for, what's the next one? Faber taking on Frankie Edgar. Yeah, so that's the next one. That's going to be a terrible one to break down. A lot of weird undercard fights. But the main event is good. Faber, Edgar, we'll break that down. We'll break that down next time, guys. And thank you for tuning in. Sorry for keeping you so long. And have a good night and good luck.